Warning, this video will contain spoilers and a breakdown for Chapter 7 of Half-Life Alyx. So, I recently got a hold of a Valve Index, and of course, the first thing I did was jump into Half-Life Alyx, a game I've anticipated playing since it was announced. And if anyone has been following up on the game or looked into it themselves, they've probably heard one particular name come up. Jeff.
My name is Jeff.
But I myself had stayed completely in the dark of anything relating to the game until I had a chance to play it. And let me just say, I feel that was a good decision. Jeff is the titular character of the 7th chapter of Half-Life Alyx, and to me and to many is one of the highest points of the game. But why is that? For me, I think it's the way Valve increasingly raises the tension as you progress through the level. Let's give a brief synopsis of the chapter. You enter an abandoned vodka distillery where Russell fondly reminisces about the wondrous poison. As you make your way through, you save a man named Larry from becoming the next meal of a barnacle, and he thanks you by informing you of the presence of Jeff.
Oh, that's Jeff.
Who is Jeff? A mutated zombie, different from any of the ones you've encountered up to this stage in the game that is unable to see, but with an acute sense of hearing, as put by Larry.
Got an ear like Mozart.
Who?
Larry gives you a small demonstration of Jeff's tendency to attack anything that makes a sound by breaking a bottle, showing how Jeff is, again aptly put by Larry.
See, he's totally predictable. But he will rip your arms off if he finds you.
So now the rules to follow and end goal of the chapter have been established. Make it through the level, don't make any noise, and use bottles to lure Jeff away from you. Simple, but pretty tense when the thing that you're sneaking around looks like this. You make your way down, but not before coming across some Zen fauna spouting spores, which you had encountered just as you entered the distillery. Larry warns you not to breathe it in, and to cover your mouth when walking through it, lest you alert the ever-vigilant Jeff with a cough. And oh yeah, Jeff has the same spore thing spouting off his back, creating a cough zone right where he walks. So, that's great. As you move forward, you hear the agitated roars of Jeff towards any sound you make, making your way to a freezer door which you unlock to progress, and then you come across a door encrusted in some weird stuff. You lift the door to open it, and hello, Jeff! Jeff hears the sound of the door being opened and immediately charges in your direction. Here begins the most terrifying part of the game, where you must actively avoid Jeff and make your way through the distillery. It is stress-inducing. But it gets worse, and Valve knows just how to make it worse. Bottles are the clear thing to use to distract Jeff away from your location, so using your gravity gloves to grab bottles is the natural course of action. But you quickly learn that it's not without its risk, as having the bottle hit something on its way to you or failing to catch it will result in an angry Jeff headed your way. You also find that moving certain objects will create sound, like causing a bottle to fall off it or this crank needed to open a door. And the level being a distillery, there are lots of bottles to be accidentally knocked over. So you take your time investigating how to get around Jeff and progress through the level. For this particular crank instance, you see the same type of freezer door you unlocked earlier and realize that if you could unlock it, the reverse must surely be possible. Throw a bottle to lure Jeff in, and close and lock the door. You're finally safe to crank the door open. Or at least, I'd feel safe if Jeff wasn't pounding on the freezer door to get out. And lo and behold, what is behind the door but an elevator? Salvation to lift you up from the hell you've currently descended into. The elevator slowly makes its way down. Slowly. Jeff is still pounding on the door. And then finally... yeah, the power goes out. So now, you've got to reroute the power to get it back on, in the dark. As you find the power line and follow it, you end up reaching the freezer and realize that you need to go in there. You have to open the freezer door. Yeah, Valve cuts the power, puts you in the dark, and makes you release Jeff. What the fuck? So you have to open up the freezer door. The footage you're seeing is from my second playthrough of the chapter, and you can see how much my hands are shaking even though I already know what's coming. As soon as the latch is up, boom! Jeff immediately bursts out. Mind you, in this chapter, not only are you running away from Jeff, luring him with bottles and releasing him from the freezer in the dark, you're doing it in VR. Him ripping open the freezer is happening right in front of you, and it's terrifying. This life-size monster is inches away from you. Even worse is that under all that stress and pressure, a sudden event or small mistake can cause you to panic and make even more mistakes, such as me powering up this speaker, and in a panic to grab a nearby bottle, I pull out my pistol and shoot it instead. It also doesn't help if your index controllers lose connection and your hands fly off into the distance to smash bottles. That might get you into a pickle. With Jeff out of the freezer and power successfully rerouted in it, you can return to the elevator to finish up. But Jeff hears the ruckus and storms the elevator right as you get it working, and you find yourself in the most unfortunate scenario of all, trapped in the elevator with Jeff. The elevator isn't going anywhere, the doors are shut tight, and Jeff is standing right next to the lift button. So there's only one option. Valve really likes testing your limits, don't they? And of course, in a classic Valve fashion, they inject some dark humor into the ride up the elevator by having you watch Jeff horrifically bludgeon and vomit acid on a head crab, all while you're listening to some light elevator music. Once the elevator doors are open, you hightail it out of there, frantically searching for the route to take, with Jeff chasing you all the while. Finally, you reach an area where Jeff continues forward without you, leaving you to make your way through a small crevice behind a wall, and finally make your way out of that hell and into the outside world. Oh, thank God! You get out and finally re-establish connection with Russell, safe at long last. Russell informs you that to move on, you need to open a large vault right in front of you. Problem is, the machine to open it is unpowered, and you need 3 energy sources to use the controls and open the vault. And the power sources are, you guessed it, back inside the distillery. After all that, after that horrific experience, they tease in your face that you need to go back inside. Nope, no, I'm done. I made it outside, I ain't going back in. In my first playthrough, this is where I had to stop and take a breather, because it seriously took too much out of me. But good old Jeff was patiently awaiting my return the next day. Heading back into the distillery pits you against Jeff yet again in a slightly bigger room made up of many small passageways, which is a pretty nice change compared to the previous area, giving you more room to navigate around the threat. You also find a gas mask that you can equip to avoid coughing in the spore cloud thingies and free your hand up for bottle throwing. The challenge with this room mostly comes with having to search for and retrieve the power sources, all while Jeff roams nearby. There are lots of different little setups, such as bottles in the way of objects, bottles that fall when you open a cabinet, and several other things that all alert Jeff to your presence. There are also plenty of items to entice you into risking a visit from Jeff in exchange for the goods. You make multiple trips back and forth to plug in the power source, maybe taking time to save each time as well, and after finally getting the machinery powered up and running, you go to open the vault. But as you've learned by now, it's never that easy. And the sounds of the controls being activated cause the sound of a Jeff to be agitated. And Russell finally gets to meet Jeff!
I do not like Jeff!
Jeff begins banging on the control panel, giving you a chance to sneak past him, or just wait until he calms down because you're too scared like I was the first time, and walk into the room Jeff came from. And inside the small room, you finally find the one true salvation. A trash compactor. One bottle toss and a lever pull later, and you finally got Jeff in a place you actually want him to be. And here, the game gives you a choice. To push the button and be rid of Jeff once and for all, or to take mercy on him, and to leave him trapped in... I honestly didn't feel safe with Jeff alive. I really thought Valve was gonna have Jeff break out at the last minute if you let him live. But Jeff is actually unable to break from the trash compactor, so regardless of your choice, you'll be free to open up the vault, and you'll get an achievement for your decision. You say your farewell to Larry, and thus ends the 7th chapter of Half-Life Alyx. This chapter really is incredible. It does so much in a short space. The second time I went through only took about 35 minutes, but the first time going through it completely blind, not too unlike Jeff, took so much longer because I had to figure out everything as I went. I had to test the limits of what Jeff and even myself could do. I had to figure out how to get through the puzzles in the level, and I had to do so while completely stressed out by Jeff. Like, it's an understatement how tense it is being around Jeff. It literally made me jump at any sudden sound.
Jesus, don't scare me like that.
And the chapter is really incredible with what it also never has to explain to you in the first place. The game never states anything explicitly or even implicitly to suggest that Jeff is invulnerable to any form of attack. I never even said anything of the sorts in the video, yet somehow you just know. Maybe it's because it's the first time you see a zombie in this fashion, or the emphasis of sneaking around in the level, or even Larry's comment about how he will tear your arms off. Somehow Valve manages to communicate that there's no quick and easy way to get through this level. You have to face this monster head on and pray your head stays that way. I knew early on when I discovered that you could cover your mouth and put on a gas mask that it would come into play in some way, but the way it did was something I was not expecting at all. This makes the antlion guard chase in episode 2 seem like a stroll through the park in comparison. So in the end, why do I have a love-hate relationship with Jeff? I love Jeff because of the high tension and creepiness. I hate Jeff because of the high tension and creepiness. Does that make sense? And now, anytime I want to play through Half-Life Alyx to experience the incredible story, world, and gameplay again, I have to pay a visit to Jeff. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. I hope I was able to provide some insight into why this part of the game is so incredible, and I honestly think you can't truly understand how terrifying it is until you play it. So, if you ever get the chance to play Half-Life Alyx, please play Half-Life Alyx. See you around. Jeff. Right